I'm going to go ahead and call us to the WSESD Transitional Board meeting to order at 6:04 on Wednesday, April 24th. And let's start with Clerk's report. And we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. And I think we can kind of start the process together, and if we need to make any changes, we can do that. But is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved to minutes of April 8th and 17th and seconded. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections of those 2 sets of minutes from the 8th or 17th? Yes.
The first set, I think I made the motion, but my name is listed as Krista on the very end of those, so just.
Krista.
It says Krista
Oh, yeah.
seconded, and
Yeah.
I don't think we have a Krista, and
No.
I think I made the motion.
Yeah.
So spell checker doesn't get those.
No.
Okay, so that's one correction. Any other corrections, deletions, changes we need to make? Those were the 8th. All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of both April 8th and April 17th as amended for the 8th minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None, okay, great. So we're gonna move into our unfinished business. And we left the last meeting, the meeting of the 8th, let me re-say that. We left the meeting of the 8th with a couple of assignments. One was to do some budget stuff for boards to be able to report out on how they came up to the budget process they came up with. And then the second one was to look at and work on amendment ideas related to those amendments that we had identified as things that we wanted to work on. So I know that maybe not everybody brought printed copies of their budgetary stuff. But does any board want to go first about explaining how they came to what they came to and share?
I'm not sure why the budget came in front of the amendments, because we had talked about the amendments and talking about the things that were important that we value in our schools. That's pretty much the highlight of this meeting, so I was wondering if we could switch the agenda and do that part first.
I guess we could. I think it's only there because we talked about budget first in the last meeting, so it was in the minutes first as the budget, and then we talked about amendments. So I think that's why it was where it was. Yes, Christina?
I had sent you an email asking if we could add scheduling a candidates night as the first order of business, just to add a discussion about that, possibly doing that since the whole electorate is voting on people that they may know nothing about. It might, and there are contested seats, it might be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's right. I meant to make myself a note when I read your email, and I did not make myself a note about that. So why don't we back up into, I guess it's sort of new business, but let's tackle that first. Christina sent a suggestion, and I think it was a good one. And I've had other people, I know people from my board had also made the suggestion that there's some sort of candidates forum or public information about the candidates before the voting on the 21st. And to be totally honest, I'm not exactly sure how that works. I know that I've been on a board for a long time now, but it was always either done, in my experience, it was either done by the press or by the or some other entity did it. I remember one year it was done by the League of Women Voters, and they hosted the candidates forum. So I'm not exactly sure how we as an entity would put something like that together, but I don't think it's a bad idea. If anybody has ideas, let's talk about it.
Ricky?
Yeah.
I think that we just organize it, announce it, and have a place for it, and do it.
Okay.
Because I agree that it's a very important thing to do. I think a couple of towns have already talked about doing something like this, and so whether they would be willing to do it as a whole, or they want to do it just for their towns, I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Yeah.
I'm not sure how much overlap there is between folks who are here already and folks who are running. I think we could add a meeting and invite the news in various forms and invite candidates to speak at a meeting of this group even.
You're going to have to speak up, Emily. I'm having a little difficulty I'll be hearing you.
Sure. I don't know how much overlap there is, but I wonder about adding a meeting for us and inviting candidates to this meeting. I think that just to add on to what I said, I think that could neutralize it also. If it makes it really clear that this group is hosting the event instead of one of the boards or one of the towns.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts about that? Yeah, Kelly.
I'm not specifically on that, but I would think if we had separate ones, if everyone is voting on everyone, then that would make it kind of challenging. People would have to go to each, and you'd have to coordinate not to have the same night. So
Right.
it seems like having one time, whether it's in a board meeting, I mean, one of these meetings, or whether it's a separate thing, seems like that would make more sense.
Everyone kind of, yeah, Jamie.
I agree that we need to have a candidate forum that is central, that is televised, and that then we have a communications plan that is related to how we invite people who can't participate to watch it. I also would like to suggest that we have a candidate questionnaire that we create that is around people articulating their positions on the Articles of Agreement and the budget, and think of what are some very thoughtful questions that we could ask that would help identify people's positions on some of the key issues facing the merge board process. And that each candidate be asked to fill those questions out, and that they be posted in a central location as a part of that process.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the board? Yes, Rick.
Following up on that, would that be for just the contested races or for all candidates?
All.
Thanks.
I think we could pick a date to do this. If everyone's kind of in agreement of doing like one centralized one, we'd have to pick a date to make that happen. I'm concerned about the time related to that, because voting is basically a little over 3 weeks away. So, and then,
It's two different votes, yeah.
well, but the vote for the candidates to elect the new board, that vote is happening, and then the idea of the questionnaire and things, Jamie. I like the concept of that. I don't know if all the candidates would have the opportunity and the time to complete a very thorough questionnaire. If A, we would have time to complete a questionnaire, and B, they would have time to then complete the questionnaire prior to the vote, especially since we don't even know what all the Articles of Agreement are going to be yet, or the budget.
Though, can I respond?
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do a draft Google form that people could edit at the what's the next one? Next Thursday's meeting. I think it would have to be vague, because we have categories of agreements. We couldn't be specific. But we have categories of concepts that have been raised that we were preparing for tonight. And then we could think about one budget question. I think it could be maybe a 5-question thing. We could approve wording or edit wording next week, and then send it to folks and give them a week to respond, so that there would be a week for people to have access to it. And I'm happy to draft it.
Can I
Yeah, Ellen.
respond to that? I think we could, I wonder if there's a way to do that, but make it easier on ourselves. I wonder could we just brainstorm a list of questions that are part of the notes of tonight's meeting, and encourage all candidates to respond to those questions at the meeting? Side note, I don't think we can do a Google form that people look at and amend because of open meeting law.
Yes.
I mean, I would present it at the meeting, and we would edit it in the meeting. So I'd create it. I brought my projector tonight, so we could project it and look at it together. And then I was doing it for something else, but maybe I could do that next time. And it would be simple enough that we could just be like, let's do this in 20 minutes, because we got so many things to do.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that maybe 2 or 3 people get together and think about that, and also what you said about a communications plan, because it really is a lot of information to get out to people. And the absentee balloting starts next Wednesday.
Right.
So if maybe 2 or 3 people or 4 could get together, try and put that together sometime in the next few days.
Mhm.
'Cause I think if we try and do it here with all of us, it probably.
Yeah, we'd be here all night just doing that, and we have other things that we need to address, yeah. All right, so let's look at dates. Because you all as board members know when your board meetings are and things like that, so we need to find a date that's neutral. I think we took most of those for this board, these board meetings.
I think we decided that it was going to be second and fourth Thursdays a long time ago.
Yeah, but I mean, but then, you know, every board has meetings also, so we need to find a time that's not being used by anybody.
Is anybody on the 15th Wednesday?
Oh, I see.
Could I make a recommendation that it's a Sunday afternoon to allow the public to participate? We're gonna do one in Putney on May 5th in the Putney Library. And so the Putney Huddle's gonna host it, and so I was thinking either the 12th or the 19th.
Mother's Day might not be the most popular.
Oh, is that Mother's Day?
The 12th is the.
Actually, it's completely appropriate.
Yes, but still might not be
Yes,
completely
right.
popular.
Well, it's
We could
also-
offer peonies or something with every attender could get a peony.
I think it might be, if we're having a questionnaire, I was just thinking the meeting that we've got scheduled for next Thursday could be a time when candidates make statements or something like that. Because, I mean, to wait till the 12th or the 19th, you know, the election's 2 days later, it really is.
Right, and
A lot of
absentee
people
balances
vote
will be
early.
out for a couple of weeks by the 19th, yeah.
So I think if we might want to push that into to next Thursday.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I make a comment?
Yes.
I like everything that everybody said, but the fact that time is of an issue, maybe there needs to be a compromise. And one might be, I've seen some of these run in the past where there's a forum, everybody's invited to come, and each candidate has 3 minutes, 5 minutes to introduce themselves and talk about why they should be elected. And then the public gets to ask questions. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. I think it gets the message out and it alleviates all of your front end work other than scheduling it.
it's a nice point. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I like that idea. I think because of the timeline, the simplicity is going to be like our best friend, both in planning and in implementation. So if people just have a opportunity to express themselves, so that's going to suffice.
I agree.
Okay, so what is everybody taking kind of what David said and then what said? Yes.
It's not my suggestion because it's a smart one. You can live stream it on VCTV.
Right. Yeah, that'd be
You
great.
have to arrange it though,
Yeah.
so that's just, you have it immediate.
Oh, great. That'd be awesome.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could we start a little early? 5:30?
Next week? Are you thinking about next week's meeting? Yeah. I mean, I don't see why we couldn't. I mean, as long as Putney's, the school's available, because next week we're in Putney. As long as the school's available to do that, and if everybody here is available for that. So what I'm hearing, and let me just make sure I'm clear what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that we're gonna invite all of the candidates that are on the ballot to come next Thursday, starting at 5:30. Every candidate will have about 3 minutes to give a statement as to why they should be elected, and then take questions from the audience. If hopefully BCTV we can set it up for live streaming by then. And I think Jamie, your idea of having some questions available, I mean, maybe there's a way to, if people want to, from this board, want to get together with put some questions together, to maybe email to the candidates. It feels a little like Survivor. I'm sorry. I got confused. But to the candidates ahead of time, so that they can maybe work some of the answers to those questions into their statements, and encourage that. Not necessarily that'll happen, but that could be encouraged. Does that sound like a plan for everybody? Sean?
Could I have clarification of the venue?
Yeah, it's at Putney Central.
Okay.
Is it when we're planning? But that's what our scheduled meeting for next week was.
Yeah, I see.
We should
Yeah.
probably think about getting a moderator too for it.
Yes.
I wonder, Tom Ehrenberg used to moderate up there, if you would be willing to do it, or
Tom would be
who's your
great.
moderator now? She's very good.
Meg is
Meg.
good.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
You might want Meg, because Tom
Yeah.
wouldn't be seen as impartial.
Okay, so can somebody ask Meg?
I can reach out to her.
Can you? I'm not sure who that is. So thank you very much.
And Rick, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We have an active write-in candidate. Would she be included?
I think that we should have time available for anybody who'd be a write-in candidate. That would be the fair way to do it. That if you want to be considered as a write-in candidate, that it should be known that you can come to that forum and have an opportunity to speak as well.
Thank you.
I want to honor the schedule that we made and that Putney was in the next rotation. I'm wondering if we should consider that more voters are in Brattleboro and Brattleboro might be a more central location for this meeting, and if we need to swap to Brattleboro Putney time.
Emily, I would agree, except Brattleboro people don't turn out in big numbers. They watch it on TV.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the audience participation this far ahead at the level of public awareness. If this is going on, it's going to be the big thing anyway.
Yeah. And I think that if people are really intent, they would. My suggestion is they would probably show up anyway. Jamie.
I can't remember the number of candidates, but I recall it being a good number. And so if I'm doing the math in my head, times 3 minutes, it's in excess of half an hour. So I wondered, what is the total number of candidates?
11, I believe.
Sean's counting.
11.
Does that include
Somebody else counting.
any potential write-ins?
No.
No.
Yes.
So it'd be
Yes.
12.
Yes.
So 12 times 3 minimally, without any Q&A time, would mean we would have to start at 5.
Well, okay. Yes.
Is there anything like Sunday, May 5th? Because people don't tend to come out in the evenings, they're busy.
You can only do what you can do.
I think they'll be watching on TV.
Yeah.
But they can't ask questions.
I saw a hand over here before.
So
So.
are most candidates here and can make it? I know I can't make that, but it shouldn't interfere with everybody else.
Sundays are hard to think.
No, I can make that, but I can't make this.
Right. And I think that no matter what date we pick, there's going to be people that unfortunately are not going to be able to be there, and there's not going to, unless we scheduled it out 6 months, which we don't have that opportunity. We're not going to really. There's going to be a time that doesn't fit anybody, and as David was saying too before about Brattleboro, but I know that over the years of being on the high school board, we moved our annual meeting from a weekday night to a weekend day. And we really saw no real difference in as far as attendance or participation goes. So
You didn't offer bedroom sets.
we did not offer bedroom sets. We did not. That's true. Yes.
I would agree with you, except that we do have some contested races, so it would be really most helpful if the contested race candidates are there, because people don't frankly have a choice for most races. But I think if I think you're in a contested seat, so I think that would be a really important one to have, where people have a choice.
Right.
And where the candidates are somewhat unknown to people from other communities. It would be really helpful to have people have the opportunity to hear for 3 minutes people's positions and their experiences.
Okay.
Our open meeting laws mean that we can't use Doodle to identify the dates that the majority of the candidates can attend?
No, we can't.
We can.
We can.
Can we please pick 3 dates tonight and create a doodle and send it out in the morning and determine the highest number of candidates who can participate? And those who cannot can submit a 3-minute blurb, and we can ask BCTV to do their video magic and splice it onto the end.
Or send in a written statement of 1 page or less. And then if we have the link to that footage, then everybody can share it, even if they couldn't make the meeting.
Yeah. That or a video, and if we have a projector, we could play it.
Okay. So is everybody good with the idea of picking 3 dates and we'll send out a doodle poll in the morning? Does that work? So do we want to keep Thursday the 2nd? And
Yes.
I heard Monday the 5th. We don't want to go too far out.
Sunday the 5th.
Sunday the 5th. We don't want to go too far out only because again people will already be voting.
What
So we-
time on Sunday?
I don't know.
I know the huddle, which already has a candidate forum, is happening at 1:30 to 3. I think it would be nice, I don't know if they're gonna wanna cancel because of this, so that was the Putney candidate forum. So, depending on what happens there, it would be nice to have it after 4.
And we probably couldn't have it at the library. I don't think it's that big enough, is it, to have something like this?
Probably not.
Can we do it at the high school?
I mean, in theory, I think we could. I'd have to check with Steve.
So is that part of the doodle?
That or the BAM's multipurpose room.
Yeah, the BAM multipurpose room.
Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday.
Well,
So if we do the second, if we keep the second in Putney,
At
and we do
5:30?
at 5:30, and then we do the 5th as a date, as a time, I heard 4 p.m., and we try to get the BAM's multipurpose room on that Sunday afternoon.
And does Lyle have any recommendations for weeknights, the week of the 6th, that we don't all have overlapping meetings?
Well, we don't have a meeting in
Not on
Dallas.
Tuesday, correct.
I didn't know if the 6th, Monday the 6th could work.
Every
the-
Monday
Yeah.
there's a meeting.
Yeah, the high school has a
There's
meeting.
Guilford has.
Guilford has a
And
meeting,
Guilford.
Vernon has a meeting, or, so Tuesday, Tuesday the 7th is the evening that there is nothing.
Nothing?
Well, I have that select board meeting that night. But it's, how about Thursday the 9th? Are we scheduling a meeting that night anyway? The second and fourth Thursdays?
We had.
The ninth?
The
Well,
2nd
no.
and 4th is
No.
Putney.
Yeah,
The
we were the
1st and
first and
3rd
third.
We were the first and
is
third.
us.
Not the second and.
Oh, this month is the first and third?
First and
Yes.
third, yes.
I think it's the first. and
Putney
third.
has a board meeting on the 9th.
Yes.
What time is your select board meeting now?
6.
We could do 5 o'clock on the set.
You're getting later and later, that's the problem.
Yeah,
Why not just dovetail it with another meeting as you're doing?
yeah, we could do that too.
The 16th is the next one, and it's only,
Well, no, one of the.
No, one of the school board
Maybe
meetings.
I can dovetail with the high school meeting. If you
Oh.
dovetail with the- You're already dovetailing it on the next Thursday, I guess.
who was Monday night, the 6th?
Guilford has one, and so does the high school.
And Tuesday was Tuesday was what?
Tuesday's no board meeting, but David has.
that's-
David has
There's no Brattleboro school board meeting on the 8th because we'll be meeting
There
on the
is.
1st.
No,
Oh, we moved
changed it to the
it.
8th, yeah.
And it's the
Oh.
compassion
yeah.
Bible.
The ninth, how does the ninth?
That's Putney.
Putney.
So we come early to Putney and spend the first hour before the meeting?
Well,
What time?
and all we're doing is trying to find an option to put out for people to say what works the most
Yeah.
to the 11 candidates, or 11 candidates and any write-ins.
What time is your meeting typically?
6:30, so we could do 5:30 on the 9th.
All right, does that work?
That would.
All right. So who? We
You
have
want me
get-
to do the doodle poll?
Yeah, but do you
And
have the
send-
contact information for all those for all the people, and that's what you have to get?
No, I was gonna send the doodle to Lyle.
Oh. But I don't know if Lyle has the contact information on those. We'd have to contact all the town clerks to get the contact
see.
information on all the
So I
candidates.
have
Don't we
all
know
of
them?
Emily, I don't have all of them.
No.
Yeah.
Who don't you have? We could
But
have-
couldn't everybody go home and get, like, I know ours,
Yeah.
Christina could get Bob's. I think
Bob Tebow.
Oh,
we could all shoot them to you tomorrow.
I think I think there's, oh no, there's also the other person.
They could all shoot them to
In
you.
Brattleboro.
They could shoot them to Lyle.
Or Jamie, could
As if she doesn't have enough on her plate.
you could send a DCC to us, and we could send it to our town's candidates, couldn't we? Like, we don't.
Yeah.
We could cut Lyle out.
Yeah, Lyle doesn't have to do it. We can make sure we have it
So then I'll send the doodle.
to all of us.
To the, or to the board
Transitional.
chairs for each, or the board chairs.
Oh, the
for
board
each.
chairs, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll make sure.
And then
that
I'll just have to
people
track
in our
down Susan.
I don't know that I have all that, so could I send the doodle to you? You
And I
send
can
it to
send
this
it
group
to
and that group
Yeah.
sends, okay, good.
All right.
Let's do
Send
that.
it to me.
That's what I can handle.
Okay.
So I'll create the doodle, I'll get the dates from you, Kim, and then we'll go from there. I didn't write them down.
2, 5, and 9.
I'll email you. Maybe I'll email them to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so candidate forum stuff, we're good. We have, well, and then we'll do whatever the most people can do based on the poll. All right. So switching unfinished business to amendments. Why don't we?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, and you can say no, but I came based on the agenda, the budget.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Dan Normando.
Yeah.
From Dummerston. David is right, the amendments are more important, but I didn't know if there was a way for me to say what my concern was, or if there's an opportunity at the next meeting to talk about budget. I don't know when you're done talking budget.
I don't know when we're done talking budget either, to be honest with you, so why don't you go ahead and say what you need to say if you're gonna need to leave, and then we'll do the next thing.
I imagine I'll have to leave, because I imagine the amendment will go on for quite some time, so.
Very well. You might be here tomorrow.
So one thing I wanted to put out there, and there's a myriad of reasons. I mean, you could ask why didn't I bring this to the high school board before, but I don't know the answer. But there's an opportunity now to have this group in your work of proposing or either agreeing to all the budgets put together or modifying the budgets. I think we have, I'm sure we have, a real issue with driver's ed at the high school. There's many people that their kids are not getting served, or they're having to drive over Searsburg Mountain and miss basketball games in the middle of the winter and pay to have their junior or senior get driver's ed. There used to be 3 instructors, now there's 1. I would like to have this group have a hearty discussion about putting funds in the FY20 budget so that that can be rectified, so that children can get their licenses before they become college students. The answer I got when I've inquired was everybody gets their permit by the time they graduate. In many parents' minds, that's not acceptable, especially in a rural area. Another response I got was, well, that conversation has happened over the years, and people felt at the time that the high school shouldn't be responsible for driver's ed. I would say that's a ridiculous answer when we are using the state education funds to do a whole myriad of education, not just high school education, and driving is very important in this rural state. So I could go on, I won't, because I appreciate you letting me say this. I really encourage you all to, I don't know what the number is, it's probably a couple $100,000, but now's the time to do it rather than wait. And I hope you guys will talk about that and consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, are we ready to talk about amendments? And the 4, if I remember correctly, that we had identified at our meeting on April 8th was the Leadership Councils, school closure, grade configuration, and the makeup of the board. And we don't have an agenda as far as how we're starting those things off. Does anybody have a preference on which one we start on?
Yes.
Yeah, Jody.
School closure,
School closure, okay.
including middle school.
Well,
that's great.
That's good grade configuration.
Okay.
Okay. So let's take a few minutes to talk about Jody, since your hand went up really quickly.
Yes, it did.
I'm assuming you have a draft amendment article for that.
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
You may have to share.
Thank you.
It's been something that has concerned Dummerston for 3 or 4 years, and Putney, and I think Guilford. It is something that I think we really need to address. We weren't able to get it in the Articles of Agreement originally, and 2 or 3 years doesn't do it for us. It's something that should be a vote of the town. I know that there are people that feel that when schools get too small, they're going to be stuck with the schools. But I know that a town like Dummerston, if they got to that point, they would realize that their kids were not getting a good education, and they would be willing to make other options. It's not like we're on the top of the mountain like Wyndham is. It's not like those kinds of situations. We have other options if it came to that. I don't think any of our schools at this point are going to go to that size that's going to be too small to operate. But I do think that you have to trust that the towns do understand. So I am hoping that we can get a vote of the community before a school is closed in that town.
Maybe everybody take a minute to read this
Yeah.
and what you guys are proposing.
So our closure of schools is on the reverse side.
It's on the back side.
Second.
Christine, could you read it? So we can hear it?
The new union district shall not close any school building conveyed to the new union district by a forming district or cease using the building to provide education in at least one grade, pre-K through 12, unless first approved by the voters residing in the towns in which the school is located. And then B, this article cannot be changed unless approved by the voters of each forming district.
So that's one proposal related to school closures. Does anybody else have, yes, Emily?
I have a clarifying question. Jody, did you say you wanted to have you said at least within 2 years, I thought?
No, this is what the original articles, I believe, were 5 years.
Yep.
The default articles are 2 years.
I see.
That does not do it for a small community who is very afraid that not the people who are running this year for the board, but a few years down the road, there may be people that have no clue with what's happening in Guilford, Putney, or Dummerston, or Brattleboro even, and say you're going to close the school.
So does this replace what's in the default articles, or do we add this to the articles?
This replaces it.
So does this need to say something about a time, years between now and when a school is even allowed to be considered?
Sorry, I can't hear you, Emily.
Do we need to add something about no school will be closed within the first, so Guilford talked about 5 years, as no school will close within the first 5 years of the district merger.
I think this says this, that no school will be closed, period.
Unless, well, if we wanted to close our school next year,
We could.
and our voters voted to close our school next year, I don't think that should be prohibited by the articles. I would find that surprising, but.
We also talked about how towns may decide, or there may be a majority of people in a town who may think that grades or the whole school would need to shift or close. Our board did feel that a 5-year stabilizing of the new district would be ideal.
Versus the two.
Versus the two. We also thought or considered the moving of grades within this article, that so we considered them as one and the same. So closing buildings and moving grades between buildings.
Because the defaults were separate, we treated them as
Okay,
separate.
that makes sense. Since I'm on it, our other that we talked about that I wonder about Dummerston and other boards was that a majority of the district board would be required. So a majority vote of the district board would be also required to close a school. We also agree that it should be a majority of the hosting or the town location.
And you would have the vote of the town plus the majority of the board?
That's what we talked about.
I'm not sure how a school closure would come about without the majority of the board wanting it to happen. It would be a motion made at a meeting over, there might be a process for it, but I'm not sure how that would ever, it's an interesting point to put in there. I'm just not sure how a minority of a board would set out to close a school.
I think any person in a town could set out to close a school, and with enough other people who agreed with them, I'm not sure that, without having it in writing, I don't know that they would need someone on the board to drive that.
So you're saying that perhaps, I'm sorry, Matt.
No, that's fine.
You're saying that perhaps a person in Guilford would petition to close the school, but then the board could say, no, we don't want to. Is that, you want that protection? Okay, I understand.
Yeah, Jamie?
I have a clarifying question. The articles, as they are in default, say that a town can do whatever a town wants. Are you saying that if the town wants, the majority in the town wants to close its school, that the merge board can stop it?
That is what we talked about. We didn't take it that far. As you're asking me, I can see the value in that, because as a merged board, we're needing to hold the budget and the performance of all of the buildings in all of the towns. And to close a school will have impacts on other schools, and it seems that the governing body of those monies and buildings should have some say. I'm not sure what say.
Anybody else? David?
Well, I just wanted to clarify something. I've been I was thinking, I don't know why I thought of this week, but I've been thinking that we would work through these amendments and we'd have them all set, and then the day of the vote for the candidates, that there would also be something people would vote for that article. Or else it would be at the first meeting of the merged board, people would vote for these amendments from the floor. Is that the way that, so we don't have to have the language finalized by the time of the vote for the candidates. We're going to give these to the elected board.
May
and then
22nd.
Right, and they might or might not then present them to the board, to the
No, they would be
annual
on,
meeting.
they'd be on the floor for a vote as well as the vote of the budget on June 25th, if we get them warned in time.
Yeah.
So they'd have to be warned a month before that meeting.
Yeah.
The same time as the budget, May 22.
We wrote a very comprehensive analysis of the timeline in Putney and are presenting it to our school board tomorrow night and are happy to share it with everybody. And
Did you already share it?
I did. Yeah.
Oh,
But it can I speak, Ricky?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
That it's May 22nd that we have to have the budget and the articles as amended warned, so that June 25th, and this is where the timeline gets fuzzy to me, is that it sounds like the merged board is in place and the ones in charge of the June 25th first annual meeting. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that means that anybody who wants to vote and participate in the vote on the articles has to be at the meeting physically. And if they want to participate in the budget vote, they have to be at the meeting physically.
Yes.
June 25th.
Yeah.
You need to remember that you can amend these at any time as long as you warn the meeting and bring the electorate together to vote on it. That's the only stipulation. So the earliest we can do that is on the June 25th when we're doing the budget. But it doesn't mean we can't do it in September, as long as, if you want to take more time with this and call another annual meeting to bring people together to vote specifically on amendments.
In my mind, there's a few of these that are so important, I would like to get them, personally, like to get them done now, and then work on the other ones later on. And that's just my feeling.
David?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm not sure that I had even never thought about if there's a petition to close a school from the town and they presented it and it came to an annual meeting and the meeting voted to close the school, that the board would be able to I don't know that that's ever possible. But so I'm not sure I'm not sure how to include that or how to fit that into this process. But the one way to manage the situation, instead of having the union board have no influence at all in this, that an article like this would be something like, if the union board identifies or votes that there's a need to close the school, then the town could have the option of voting to leave the union and join the SU, kind of the way it is now, so that they can retain their school and retain governance of their school, but the union wouldn't be responsible for managing it or any of the other reasons, any of the other problems that might have come up.
I think one thing, David, and Lyle or Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we have to have a WSESU because of Vernon, but at any moment, the AOE could rule on Vernon and move Vernon, and then that would dissolve the WSESU. And then that would no longer be a thing. So that wouldn't be an entity for if a school decided to do that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, well,
just-
I know it's possible, but it's also, there are several situations like this, and there doesn't seem to be any interest at all in changing that.
No, there doesn't right now, but I don't want us to hold on to that yet.
So going back to Emily's point of the new merged board needing to have some sort of discussion about closing a school, there could be, let's say, 60 students. And the merged board, the new board is going to know what schools can take those students on, the impact that transportation's going to have. There are other things that we're going to need to consider when we're closing a school than just closing down that building. We've got children that we need to be
They're
considering.
most important.
Exactly.
Yes, most important.
And that's why I could see that the merged board would want to have some, maybe not the final say, but certainly discussion about what are best options for those children.
Yeah, I could see adding it to it.
Emily or Kelly, since your board addressed this, do you have some language already prepared that you could read to us?
We don't, but we'd be happy to put that together.
Okay.
Kelly reminded me of something else that we talked about. So we wondered about the 5-year status quo for stabilization of the new organization, but then we wanted to see a formal 1-year study period of any building that the board or others wanted to close, and that would include town participation and input through the process. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that I wondered, I wasn't part of the Act 46 study committee originally, and maybe some folks were, but at some point you had to consult with an attorney to make sure that the articles matched what was allowed. So David, to your question, I'm not sure when in our process that happens.
Throughout.
Yeah, it's a constant process.
So do we have our first question on the list?
Well, I think we need to come up with the language and then see,
Okay.
can we do this? Jody?
Well, I also think, when we had the original articles of agreement, they had to go to the Board of Education for approval. These will go to the towns for approval. And so, but we should pass them off a lawyer, that's for sure. But it's not going to have to go to the Board of Education.
Why wouldn't it?
Because it's not required.
Yeah, we don't have to. All right. So does anybody, Emily, go ahead.
I'm not sure that I said this as clearly as I would like. Guilford's a good example of a school board, which I understand would be different in the future, but the Guilford School Board in the last 5 years, with town input and participation, after I think a many-year process, moved the middle schoolers to BAMS. And that choice was made, well, for a lot of reasons, but whatever language we decide, we've talked about, we want to make sure that is still possible. That,
But that would be under the grade configuration.
Okay.
That's one of the 4 articles.
Shall we move to that? Sorry,
Let's finish school closure for tonight. Not saying we're done with school closure, articles of agreement, but let's finish that before we start muddling it up by talking grades as well, because that just would get confusing for everybody, I think.
Sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. So, school closure, does anybody else from any other towns have thoughts? Yes, Kim?
And just from being on study committee before, and I understand the small towns and wanting to protect your schools, but Jody, just based on what you said, you never know what's going to happen with the school board and how that's going to change. You never know what's going to happen with towns, and you say, oh, the town's going to realize, oh, we need to close the school. You can't say that 100% sure.
No, you're right.
So,
You're correct.
I just worry that one town can hold all the power to not, we're supporting a school that's not viable. And that, we've got it in here that the town has to say yes, and
Well, I think
and they don't.
if the school turns out not to be viable, you're going to have the AOE and the BOE on your case too. So you've got to factor that in. So if they're not doing their job and doing their...
It's not saying that they're not doing their job, because obviously they're going to try to do their job, but if they don't have the students, just, you know, and you have not enough students to, you know, to with all the teachers that you need, because you still need teachers for those classrooms.
I think the parents are not going to be happy with something like that. I know I wouldn't, and, you know, and I'd be looking for some other place to go. So.
Yes, you're saying that, but that doesn't mean that will happen.
Yeah, Kelly.
Has it been determined how is viability been determined? You know, I mean, when you talk about, I just am trying to get it straight in my mind. When you're talking about who should be making decisions, first of all, how will any of these, whether it's the board or the towns or a combination, how will they actually make the determination that any one school is or isn't viable?
It's a good question. Not exactly. I mean, I know that. I mean, just to go back to what Emily said about Guilford moving the middle schoolers to BAMS, I know that from what I heard from the high school end of things, that the town and the school board in Guilford really looked at what the educational quality they could provide based on the tax rate and money and the kind of teachers and what kind of educational opportunities they would get in a different system.
Well, I wonder.
And then that was part of I think that was part of their viability conversation. But I think that when it comes to closing a school, viability would be very different depending on the community. It would depend on the community.
I wonder if that can be kind of.
I don't know if it can be quantifiable.
Or viability to one person or one group could be totally different to another. So I guess I would feel more comfortable having some sort of a description or parameters for that. But I also wanted to say that I do agree with having the board play a part in making this decision, because towns can, sometimes there's politics in towns. We hope nobody wants to believe that happens, but
no.
You know, and I think it's a good oversight for both. It's the just check and balance, I think, and I agree that the merged union district, whatever the entity is actually called, they will be responsible for, taking care of the needs of these children that are no longer going to be in these schools. And so I think it does make sense that they would have play some role in whether the school is closed or not. But I'm not sure what the parameters are as far as viability or not.
I just jotted down some language that may encompass Guilford's input, but I just like, if it pleases the board, I'll just spew it out there and we can take it for a ride. Prior to school closure, a one-year study of student and community impact will be undertaken by the merged board. Any school closure proposal must be approved by the majority of the merged board.
Emily?
I'd love to hear what, did Brattleboro and Putney get a chance to talk about this? I do like that. I have one amendment to it, but I don't feel like we've heard much from the other towns.
So Putney, of which there are 3 of the 4, and actually soon to be 5, or 4 of the 5, we haven't had formal discussions around this yet. We're having our board meeting tomorrow night, and so I was hoping that we would finalize our language recommendations tomorrow night and then be prepared for the next meeting. Didn't know how far down the finalization road we were going. That being said, I have personal comments I would like to make in response to Christina's statement.
Go ahead.
Now?
Yeah, go for it.
You took out the vote of the town.
No, I'm adding, this is additional language.
Okay,
to
good.
What I wrote.
Okay, I thought you just took out the vote of the town.
No.
Yes, if that's additional language, that's
Yes.
lovely, thank you.
Did Brattleboro Town have a conversation about this? My David?
No.
Not specifically.
No, we talked mostly about what was important to us.
Yeah,
and
okay.
values the process, so we didn't really specifically address this one.
Okay. Emily, you said you had an amendment for what Christina had written?
I can't remember.
Okay, sorry.
Will you read it again?
Prior to school closure, a one-year study of student and community impact will be undertaken by the merged board. Any school closure proposal must be approved by the majority of the merged board. I guess merged board, unified board.
Unified board, yeah.
Unified.
Does that tag along with your?
Yes, that's the preamble or the,
It'd be all part of, it'd all be part of one article of agreement.
yes,
Yeah.
one, it would be added on to our closure of school.
Yes, Kelly.
One thing I'm not sure, maybe I'm just missing it, but in the draft articles, it gives 2 years straight. It seems like a sort of a grace period. And I really feel, and I think most of our board really, or all of our board, felt that we're kind of in the infancy of this process. And to say, I mean, to say from 2 years from July 1st, we're just kind of getting our feet wet. So we really felt that there needed to be some amount of time that nothing happened, and it would, you know, that there would be absolutely none, and then the review of whether there were things that needed to happen, but that there really needed to be like this grace period.
So I could add in that original grace period, no school closure will be contemplated or will occur during school years. As an addendum, as an addition,
For 5 years?
2.
2 years.
Oh, I thought Guilford wanted more.
We did.
So can I maybe make a suggestion for just to get language right, and since we're meeting again next week, maybe Christina, since you seem to be writing a lot of stuff, and maybe get touch base with either Kelly or Emily from Guilford to finalize the language for this article for next week. And then if Putney, because you guys are meeting tomorrow.
We'll weigh in tomorrow.
Yeah, then you guys will have some input that we can maybe add to it next week's meeting about school closure, and then we can kind of maybe have a finalized article
Okay.
related to this
Got it.
after next week's meeting, or at next week's meeting.
I just want to say that when we surveyed Dummerston, this and the middle school were by far the prime issues for Dummerston.
Yep.
So,
When Christina gets the language, she could send it to Ricky, and you could send it, we could all send it to all of our boards and ask people to reply
Mhm.
sender to
Yep.
get feedback, so that we've heard from all of the
Yep.
people.
Yep. But I think that just because you all have had a lengthy conversation
Oh, yeah.
about this and have some input, that before it goes out that way, that
Absolutely.
perhaps what Christina comes up with, adding stuff, could get cleared by you, the two of you, and then you guys can have a finalized version that way, just so that you guys had some conversation about this pretty extensively, so I don't want to miss anything before it goes to everybody. Yes, Jamie?
Is it possible that you could do that before 6:30 tomorrow night?
I will do it well before 6:30. I will have it to you early tomorrow morning, Guilford, and you can
Perfect.
do what you will with it. And
Thank you.
as long as you look at it by 6:29, I can
Sounds
get
good.
it
All right?
to my fellow board by 6:30.
Okay.
All right, so we're good for tonight for school closure, yes?
Sounds terrible when you say
Yeah,
that.
but I mean, as far as the topic goes,
Okay, yeah.
moving on to other topics.
We're very
All right.
sensitive.
Yes, so since we've kind of danced around it and mentioned it a couple of times, why don't we look at, first, Dummerston passed on their draft things, they have grades to operate, which would be grade configuration. So do you want to read that to everyone, since the audience in BCTV doesn't have a hard copy?
Surely, grades to operate. And this first comes sort of from the default articles definitions. For purposes of these articles, the words restructuring of grade configurations, restructuring, and any grammatical variations, meaning eliminating all classrooms for any grade or grades pre-K through 12, operate at one or more schools, and requiring children in the grade or grades to attend classrooms located in a different school. So B, any grade configuration restructuring proposal shall require the affirmative vote of each town affected by the grade reconfiguration proposal. And C, this article cannot be changed without approval of the electorate of each member town.
Did anybody else have conversations? Guilford, you had some conversations about this? Emily, sorry.
That's okay. We did talk about it. We feel like it's important for towns, as I've said, for towns to be able to initiate this conversation. If a town or people in a town might feel that their students could be better served at VMERS, for example, we want there to be an avenue for that. I also have a question. So it's a clarifying question. In B, towns affected by the grade reconfiguration proposal, if we're a board serving 4 towns, to me, all of the towns are affected by any grade reconfiguration because that's going to impact our budget and our staffing and our buildings.
Just to clarify, I don't think it'll affect the budget because
Why not?
if it's a unified district,
If we're,
but
for
then
example,
it doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, then budgetarily it doesn't matter.
Well, in the context Emily's
Okay.
suggesting,
I'm
it
confused.
has to do with staffing, and staffing is all added up,
Right.
from the individual towns. So it would factor,
Okay.
collectively.
But it wouldn't from
There is
a
no
per pupil
individual,
cost.
right, there is no
it
individual.
doesn't change it for people cost, but there might be an economy of scale, and that might be why a town might decide to send their 8 kids to another town that has space for those 8 children.
Mhm. Definitely. So it was budget, what was the other thought you had? Sorry.
I'm putting it to the group, do we feel that this both protects the towns who want protection from an involuntary move and protects the towns who want to initiate a move?
Yes.
Can I
Jamie.
respond?
Yeah.
I do not know Dummerson's response, but one of the interesting parts of our budget values one-pager was a discussion within, at our last board meeting on 4/11, that a number of community members attended and gave their feedback. Individually, I've had conversations with board members and the principal, all of which who have said that one of the primary things that they believe is a commitment to the pre-K through 8 model. So the idea that we would initiate that process, I think is doubtful without some significant occurrence that would not be driven by the merged board.
How many kids are in the Putney cohort at this point?
Putney Middle School. I don't know the figure off the top of my head. I don't know if Wild is.
There are approximately probably
50-ish.
17 per grade.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
However, there's a huge 26, 28 class moving in.
Yeah, that's right. The 50
So,
is really
yeah.
big. Yeah, I think it's just over 60.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is, it's something that the Putney community has talked about for as long as I've lived there as being a real value of the school.
Christina?
Well, I think conversely, it could be that a school, Brattleboro decides they want to have K through 8 model schools, and that's going to affect the budget. And that would be a discussion that would affect each town, That may also happen. I didn't think about that as reconfiguration. But, big cities are doing that, so it's not out of the realm of what's actually happening in our nation. So maybe it should be, well, then each town would be affected. So I think that goes to your logic. All towns.
Yes, go ahead.
You reminded me of something we also talked about, that we want to make sure the language doesn't preclude other towns from adding pre-K classrooms.
You mean like us?
Good example.
Got one going.
Gilbert's been really pleased with our pre-K,
Yes, you
and
have.
we would love, as a member of the new district, we'd love to support and encourage that in other towns and other communities. And so, I'm asking, does this get in the way of that? It only says closing, right? or reconfigure.
Yeah, it's a negative.
It is
yeah.
negative.
It's negative,
Good
yeah.
point, yeah.
But B says any grade configuration, restructure and proposal.
Yeah.
So that really, and needs the vote of, affirmative vote of each town affected.
Yeah. That's a really fair point. It's part of the equity argument. I
Yeah,
think
Kelly?
is-
No, meaning eliminating all classrooms or a class. So the definition is eliminating, right? A was.
No, it says restructuring of grades.
And any grammatical change, meaning eliminating
yeah.
all classrooms and requiring.
You could just say meaning changing or adding or something.
Hang on a second. Kelly?
I think similar to the closure of schools, there should be something in there requiring, whether it's a period of study or something to make sure that this isn't like a hasty decision, you know.
Some sort of anomaly in numbers. or
Right,
something.
yeah. I mean, I think it protects everyone and it makes sure that it's a well thought out plan of action.
Perhaps adding the language that was included in the closure, that a one-year study approval of the board, so that the governance body has a chance to review the viability of a plan. Which, to my mind, that's going to happen no matter what, but to formalize it in the articles would probably be wise.
Also, I think that under A on your proposal about, you know, if we use, instead of just the word eliminating, we use eliminating, adding, or changing,
Okay.
something like that, just to change the restructuring definition so that it's not just the negative, it's also the other side of it too.
Yeah, good
Would-
idea.
Would make the definition flow a little bit better with other things that we're talking about, adding pre-K or changing
Like that.
something to a K through 8 school.
Somehow I think I'll be doing this editing as well, so.
Jamie?
This was some of the questions I was having about the budget, and so I feel like it overlaps with this. And so one of the big concerns and the reasons I ran is because of my concern around how Act 46 appeared to me to reduce a more democratic process into a less democratic process. And so I was trying to think, how do you protect democratic process and participation as it is clear that like a 30-person body is being brought down to an 8-person body, that there aren't school-specific decision-making bodies of authority. I was trying to look at all these different angles, and so one of the questions that came up for me was, before we begin changing the budget, and so this is how I don't know if they're connected or not connected, but I wanted to ask if before boards vote on budget cuts to a specific school, changing staffing ratios, kinds of staff, social workers, art, music, phys ed, or elimination of programming, you must have a warned community forum in the impacted community and receive testimony from impacted families with 30-day warning. So I was trying to think of how do you create space for conversation and force us to listen to each other before we make decisions that impact each other. And I was thinking about fears I'd heard out of Brattleboro, fears I'd heard out of, Putney and Dummerston, and just thinking about, and I haven't heard all of Guilford's fears, so sorry. But I was just thinking, how do you, what is that space? So I don't know how it intersects with these two articles, but it's something that was coming up for me.
Emma?
What if we added a little more specific language to that 1 year of study to include public, like some of the things that you just said, public, what did you call them, panels or forums?
A warned community forum on the impacted community.
Except that except I feel like Jamie was taking it a little further in terms of, we can't afford social workers. The merge boards, they're like, no, we can't afford social workers, and that's a programmatic cut. It's not a grade closure, it's a programmatic closure.
So that's the piece to me that was, like, how do you create space for making sure that we understand each other? And it got back to the budget values
piece.
David?
Well, a couple of things. One is the Leadership Council will help a lot with that, for sure. But the, having a formalized equity oversight committee, equity and diversity committee would make sense. Where that conversation would take place would probably be the best way, the best structure to put into the document to do, because you could be made up of people from all of the leadership councils to sit down and talk about that, and be able to explain why it's necessary for one school to have something that's different than another. That was the question all along. Is inequity mean that there's difference, or does it mean that everything has to be the same? And what it means is that different schools have different needs. And so there really would need to be some sort of a structure in the system that's responsible for looking at that and bringing that to the board, for when decisions have to be made.
Joe?
Well, two quick things. It's very interesting right now that in the April meeting of the State Board of Education, they're trying to define equity. It was very interesting to watch. Secondly, our alternative governance structure had something like this.
Well, I didn't want to say that, Joe.
I'm sorry, but there was, because we felt when we were writing this thing that there was a big need for us to have these conversations, and not in a situation where people were give and take and this kind of thing, just to have these conversations. And that what Putney has with their forest, and Guilford has with their woods, and somebody else has with a language, is that equity? It may not be equal, the same exact thing, but it does work with their values. So I think having something like that, and I don't know if you were going to put it as another article or whatever, but is an important thing to have.
Yeah. Another thing that came up just this week, or last week, was we decided to hire the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity to work with us, with the district and the administration, to try to attract a broader array of qualified candidates. And one of the things that was evident in that conversation, and then when Lyle and I sat down with Curtis Reed afterwards to sign the contract, is that there's way more to it than just knowing more places to send advertisements. There's ways, the questioning, the advertisements, all the websites, the way things appear, all the things that are implicit or that really mean something to people of color, or people, differences in race or gender or ability, that we wouldn't necessarily know about, having someone to help with that. And then when someone gets hired, to bring them on and work. So there's a whole process of becoming a more diverse and more inclusive community that really needs to be done consciously and carefully as well. So that made sense for that to be part of. And that came up in our conversation, that anything that looks at equity should also look at diversity and look at it in an ongoing way, not necessarily, okay, we got good ads and we're going to all the right websites, but that we're really looking at the effects and how well it's working. So having a committee that's really focused on those issues seems like we need to. It's a time when we need to have something like that.
Ricky?
Yes.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
It wasn't me.
I know, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, and David, you bring up something that I was going to suggest, that after we got through these 4 articles, is us as a transitional board to make a recommendation to the new unified board as to what committees they should have, and that was one of the ones that I had in my mind as a recommendation to the committees that board should create, and whatever configuration, whether that's through leadership councils or leadership councils, whatever. But I agree with you that we need to do that as well. So just to get us back to grade configuration and grades of operation. So we've made some changes to what Guilford has passed around, a couple of suggestions, and Christina has got some wording for that, which is very nice. Thank you. Does anybody else, Brattleboro? Kim.
I just wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any issues. Say, that one of the school, you have a class of, a grade of 35 kids one year, and the next year there's a class of 12. That it doesn't disallow moving those teachers around as needed, by grade, because obviously a class that's next year that's coming up with 12, you don't need 2 teachers in the school that year for that grade. Whereas the class that's moving up, 35 kids, you're going to need 2 teachers when the previous year you only had 1. So we need to make sure that we're not limiting the possibility
Very
of
good
doing that.
point.
I think that's really important to protect
Yeah.
building level decisions.
Yes.
But
And-
you're
and
talking in a building.
In a building, yes.
But you're restructuring.
Yeah, I think what Kim's
classrooms.
saying is like, if the second graders
Yeah.
have 2 teachers
Yeah.
and 35
Right.
kids.
We do that
Yes.
anyway.
But next
Right.
year, they only need 1 teacher, but the third grade needs 2
But
teachers.
put it
But we need to make sure that we're not limiting, and that's not something that, the whole board needs to vote, that's something that the administration
Right.
needs to take care of.
So I think strengthening that second line, meaning eliminating all classrooms for any grade, could be strengthened somehow to.
Right, because you're
say
not
very
eliminating
clear- you're
all
not elim-
classes.
Right.
Well,
You're
we're
just,
gonna
Yeah.
add or
but
change.
you do need to be
think
fiscally
that says
smart
that,
and,
yeah.
You're right. I mean, because we do it now, there's no
yes,
reason why we
no.
can't continue to do it.
Right, we need to make sure that we don't hinder the administration in
Or the new
current
board.
process, or the new board in their current
That's not
process.
so that
taking
they have to
12
do the
kids and
administration.
moving them down to Brattleboro.
Right, no,
just right in the
it's,
classroom.
but it's, doing what we do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emily.
To Christina's point, couldn't we just delete all classrooms? So it just says variations mean eliminating grades or grades.
Well, we could change this. We took this out of the
Yeah.
default articles of agreement, so we don't even need the whole thing if you want to change the whole thing.
Well, let me think
You
on
work
that
on it.
maybe, and
Yeah.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
So,
So it looked, yeah, Emily.
I just want to make sure that the proposed merger articles from 2017 take this school closures further, and they also take the grade reconfiguration further.
Mhm.
And I wonder if are people aware of that?
Yes.
And do we choose not to do that? So, for example, should I read? They're on page 7, and it's linked on the WSESU website. Like regarding school closure, those original merger articles said that 4 public meetings would be required, that in the event of closure, students living in the town affected would go to the closest school, to the place of residence. Like there are more protections articulated for the kids and the families.
Isn't that kind of covered under the years of study type of thing, and you could include that with that?
Is it?
I think that, I'm, to Emily's point, I think that and people that are on the study committee with me can help me remember, but I remember us having this conversation for months.
Years.
And we felt like we needed to add that stuff in so that it was very clear. So that it wasn't assumed it was part of the study of a study process, a year long, 2 years, whatever study process, that there was no assumptions made. That was the feeling of the study committee at the time, to add those things in.
Well, I have no problems with that as long as the town still has the vote.
Mm-hmm. Christina?
I think a lot of that was added because there was no town vote. So while we could, I think maybe specifying some of that stuff might be a great idea, and having some study and some discussion, it got more and more as a way to sort of make the small towns feel better about a possible closure in absence of a vote.
So maybe can I speak?
Yeah.
Maybe the way that it is addressed is underneath the study committee that will include in its rubric of study these things.
Everyone feel pretty good about that?
So Christina's going to write something and pass it on to Emily and Putney, and Brattleboro.
I'll send it on to
Work
Putney.
tomorrow. Or sleep tonight.
She doesn't hurt. She doesn't.
All right. So we've kind of tackled and getting some wording together, hopefully for next week, for both the school closures and for the grade configuration piece. The other two things that we had identified to talk about was the size and makeup of the board and leadership councils. Does the board have a preference of which one we go to next?
Leadership council.
Leadership councils? All right, let's do the big one. So I know that Dummerston, on their sheet that they passed out, there is something here. I don't know if anybody else has anything else prepared related to leadership councils. But maybe we can take a second and look at Dummerston's, maybe.
Shall I read aloud?
Thank you very much. Read aloud, please.
Leadership councils. The Unified District Board shall assure community input continues to guide school governance. The board recognizes fewer representatives in communities could diminish opportunities for governance access, and current research suggests consolidation may also lead to loss of community involvement. To help mitigate this effect, school-based leadership councils shall be established at each school. These councils will include a school administrator, teachers, board members, parent community members, and students when appropriate. Responsibilities of school-based leadership councils: support inclusive community engagement activities, ensure alignment with community values and expectations, establish school-based goals regarding student learning and community values, review student learning needs and progress measures, assist in initial budget development, review resource priorities, provide feedback on policies and procedures, provide input in hiring processes, support school and district communications, provide input on learning initiatives, and coordinate local school committees and organizations.
Did any of the other boards have other language related to leadership councils to share? David?
Well, we spent quite a bit of time talking about this, and we looked at the language in the articles, the 2017 articles, and thought that it was pretty inclusive. The two things that and Emily and Kim, correct me, I think there were only two things that we thought needed to be more specific. One was that a board member would be a member of the Leadership Council, and the other was around the initial budget development responsibility that wasn't in the original draft. So this includes that, so I think this fits pretty much. Is that what you remember, Kim?
Yes. I mean, and the only other thing that I thought is I think that all of the unified board members should have to rotate through all of the schools, because that's the only way you're going to learn about all of the schools. We need to start thinking about all of these kids as our kids and care as much about the kids in Putney and Brattleboro as you do in Dummerston and Putney. So the only way to do that is to make sure everybody's going to rotating through all the schools and
Are
their
you thinking
leaderships.
about, like, every month go to a different one?
Every month or every 2 months, because you need to develop, a relationship with these schools, and I don't think them seeing your face once will do it, but, most of these positions after the first year will be 2 or 3 year positions. So going going to meeting at one school for 2 months and then rotating out, I think that needs to be done.
Christina?
I love that idea. I think that's a great idea. So, and then the only downside of that is I think of the relationship of understanding who the players are and who, that's a big.
I know.
That's a lot. And so how do you, if you're going, this is Tuesday, it must be Dummerston. Is there time to develop any relationship? Would maybe a quarterly kind of situation be
that
better?
works too, but I think we just need to make sure that the same people are not in the same schools all of the time.
Jody?
Yeah.
Would this board member or these board members be a voting member of this, or just there sitting in on the conversation to bring back to the big board?
I don't know if they should really be voting members. I mean, they're there to, but there's nothing really that there's nothing
Really
that the leadership councils are going to be able to enact with voting.
I know that when the 2017 articles were put together, one of the things that we had long conversations about was that the board member that was at the leadership council, sitting at the table, when it got back to the unified board, would be with the building administrator, who presumably would be at the meeting, would be helping to advocate for whatever it is they were looking for, whether that was a budgetary line item or whether that was a particular thing, whatever it was, that board member, because they were intimately involved in the conversations and heard from all the people in the room at the leadership council, that they could be part of that advocating voice at the unified board level. Yeah.
But I'd be a parent and somebody else is a teacher, and we don't agree on something or whether that somehow you have to come to some sort of consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Or
But
communicate that disagreement.
Disagreement, yeah.
Yep.
Emily,
Yeah.
didn't we talk about the board members being a liaison? Isn't that what?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
because we had a lot of conversation about that, and the idea was that a school board member, or in the unified sense too, would be more associated with policymaking at the district level. It's good for them to have a perspective on the day-to-day operations, obviously, of the school, but it kind of starts to delve really deeply into school operations in a nitty-gritty way that seems a little bit, I don't know, beyond the reach or beyond the scope of what is expected. So we had talked about them always being a liaison so they can hear the community input, but not having so much weight on the leadership council, or being referenced kind of as having that weight too, like people looking to them to make decisions.
Emily, and then Jamie?
That's a good dovetail to what Guilford talked about. We loved, Kelly can help me, to summarize, we loved the sentiment of building in a structure for more community input and participation with all of the decision making that would happen at the board level. And we're very wary of the authority that might be given to those leadership councils, and the how muddled it could be if in boundaries for volunteers to be advising our superintendent, or just to be really extreme. We love the sentiment. We're concerned about how it actually plays out, and how much power somebody who's not an elected official might end up having in that role.
Jamie, and then Sean?
One question I had was, I feel like I'm missing some of the threads of the conversation we've been having for a couple minutes, so maybe this is incorporated, but that the leadership councils are a subset of the board, like meaning that they're actually committees of the board. No. Not that they would be part of the school, that they would be meeting at the school, that isn't changed, but that the concern I had was the opposite of what you articulated, was that they would be seen as not legitimate in some way, and that by being that they would operate out of the school, that by being a committee linked in some way to the board, that would give them some legitimacy beyond. I think this is what your point was, but I was talking about require rotating location of meetings to be in every school annually, so that members of, I think that's the piece I didn't get, with members of the merge board would know and be in relationship with people at each of the schools. It was an attempt to try to create that dynamic, so. And then another thought was to require one representative from each of the other towns to participate in that school's leadership council. So it would be an opportunity for people from Dummerston and Putney and Guilford to sit and participate in the leadership council of Brattleboro.
Just to clarify the question, do you mean the board member from those towns, or just a random person from the community?
Meaning that a member, I haven't looked at how complicated this would get, so this was just my lovely afternoon brainstorm while I'm sick. So that you would have a member of the leadership council from each of the other towns meet with the leadership councils of the other towns, so that they would know each other. I would have to sit and do math on a page to see if
Well,
it
also,
actually.
we're talking about volunteers in many cases, so requiring volunteers to do something, in my experience, gets a little sketchy. Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what you just said, Ricky. It says, I'm looking at the articles of agreement that were submitted on, in 2017, and it says local input will be advisory. So, if you're thinking that they're gonna make motions and have votes, it's not gonna happen. So the way it's set out, I think that in a way, the leadership councils was, proposed to replicate school board duties in the existing supervisory union. And I don't think it's very practical, really. So if people are asked to be advisors, hopefully there'll be enough people that are interested, but I'm a little afraid of the apathy. So.
I am too.
Christine?
So I believe that, and my choice of verbs was meant to sound advisory, like assist
Well, no,
or review.
I was reading from the 2017.
Right, and so when we wrote our leadership council, we were trying to use words that were very clear that it was an advisory role, that you are just as a conduit, because one of the concerns is there's so many fewer representatives, it's not possible to know what's happening in the schools as we currently do. Just, there's not enough bodies, there's not enough hours in the day. And so this was a way to keep that conduit. And my preamble is very true, to keep the community input, because that's what supports education, and we're all dead in the water if we don't keep that going. So I think that is really the intent. And I think Jody and I built on that leadership council to try to make the verbs more clear. I'm very open to changing the verbs, because we did this pretty quickly, to make it very clear it's advisory and helping establish priorities, but that there's some level of community input as long as people are interested in serving on that.
And one of the things that is in the 20, just related to, I think I mentioned a couple times about apathy and people not wanting to be engaged. One of the things that's in the 2017 argument that the study committee came up with that I think might help with that is basically it asks for the transitional year for school leadership councils to have existing town school board members willing to serve in those roles. So people who are now just getting off of a board, asking them to help be part of that, because as in those individual schools, and I think about that in a way of just helping with the transition part.
Sorry, Jody, you're not done.
No, I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion.
I think it's probably a good suggestion, Ricky.
Yeah, and just for the first year to
Not
have
everybody
that
wants to
consistency.
take it on, maybe.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think it says something along the lines if they're willing to serve, kind of thing. Kelly?
No.
I just wanted to reiterate our concern, one of our concerns about this was with the board not being elected. And in the 2017 draft, it shows a serve on interview committees for school staff and faculty. It shows a lot of things that could have large impacts on school activities and school, administration sort of stuff. And I guess that was our real concern, was that if these were people that were just volunteering for it, and though we all love to have people volunteer and help and participate, that these, you get all sorts when you have volunteers, and you can't, maybe you'll get someone that has a great expertise, or maybe you'll get someone that does not, and for them to be making equal recommendations, and how how is that allowed to be handled by the administration, whether that's by the schools or the superintendent's office. Part of my concern, I'll say, is that if these are volunteers, they can choose to unvolunteer. They can choose to volunteer and then set something in motion, and then they can unvolunteer, and then whatever is happening, good or bad, they can choose to no longer participate, and so those were part of our concerns.
Yeah.
I think To answer your first question, Kelly, is that you can get the same type of thing through a volunteer and through somebody who runs through for a board as to they
But there's a little bit
participate
more,
more.
a school board, if you have someone who's elected, there's a little bit more
You hope.
accountability. I guess that was part of what we were concerned about, is the accountability of volunteers.
David?
One of the things that we talked about, I can't remember which context it was, about the leadership councils was having, for the teachers, having the staff elect their representatives to be on the leadership councils, and having the parent groups recruit parents to be on as well, and to do that really consciously so that you get a diverse representation on those councils of the community. It's only going to be a couple of people, so to do it kind of carefully. And I think the other point about the specific things in the 2017 articles, I think it mentions 3 specific things as examples. And I think that having the responsibilities really clearly laid out so that people know exactly what they are, and again, using words like, or verbs like support and ensure,
Assist,
and
review.
review and assist and provide feedback and provide input and support and provide and coordinate that indicates what the role is really pretty clearly. So I think that you can be kind of careful about who gets on, and also be really explicit about what the responsibilities are. And the other thing, though, just in general, is that the idea of having these councils is so that there's a structure in place for a community's voice to be heard. And sometimes community people say things you'd rather not hear, and sometimes they're not really as deeply informed as you might like, and there are people that occasionally, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there are people who don't agree with me. And, but you have to live with it. No, but that's really an important part of the structure, is to have those voices.
Sean?
I'd like to go back to what Lyle mentioned, that these articles can be changed now, or September, or October, or whatever. And I think at our last meeting, I was the one that said, along with a lot of other people, leadership councils are very important. But I think it's nothing that's going to be figured out and worked out by the first meeting of the Unified Union Board. Excuse me for using those 2 words. It's not going to happen. So I'd almost say that we can let the hard work that we've done on this go to sleep for a while and wake it up later.
Well, you don't want to pick it up as soon as things change then. I think it should be started right away.
Christina?
Right.
What about putting wording in there, like within the first year, and may include, because some schools may not want, I'm going to tell you, in Dummerston, we love having community input on hiring process. That may not be true in Guilford. So this list came from Dummerston, and I think that's been something that's been really a positive thing, to have teachers involved in the hiring process and the community, and so it isn't all on the board's shoulders as to being part of it, or all on the principal's. We find it to be a really intelligent process for us. If that's not true within the Guilford school community, we should tell that leadership council what to do if that's not of interest to the community. But this could be the list of things that's contemplated and it's decided by a leadership council. So we could maybe write this to be more open-ended, to get this thought on, while we've spent weeks and weeks and weeks of our lives talking about leadership councils. To just drop it is a little bit of a concern. Agreed.
I didn't imply that we drop it.
But to put something in now, just to keep it sort of going, I think might be helpful if we could loosen up the start date on it and the requirements.
So Kelly, and then David.
Kim had her hand up too.
And Kim, yeah. And so did Rick. And Kelly, go ahead.
I think it could be a potentially important aspect, and I agree with having community involvement. I am just concerned about making sure that the boundaries, and you talked about boundaries, and making sure that there are boundaries, and that the volunteers were aware, and it's clear that it's advisory, that they're not making the decisions, that they are advising. That's really, I guess, where my concern lies.
David?
Yeah, I just want to point out that there are dozens of merged districts that had leadership councils as an important component and really were committed and you know, we're gonna get these going, and they're having a very difficult time getting them established because there's so much else going on. And having this done and voted on in 2 months seems to me like a much better idea. How it rolls out, how active you are, one school or another is in any one of these things, whether it's input and hiring or resource priorities or developing budgets. Different groups are going to have different interests and different things that are important to them. But to have it in place, I think, on day one is really important.
Kim?
I was just going to agree with Christina and now agree with David at the same time.
All right, Rick?
Rick Nelson, and I'll defer as well, but what Kim was saying, as far as having one board representative attend a leadership council meeting, I would also recommend that the school or their town board's member also attend at the same time, so that they understand what's going on from their own school's leadership council. I mean, you don't want just one person. You're talking about rotating. It's a great idea, everybody, you know, collectively speaking, but I think you almost ought to have one from the town and one rotatee, if you will, attend those leadership council meetings. And that's enough on that for me.
The only issue with that, and as it stands right now, Brattleboro has 2 members, and we have 3 schools plus EES. That will not be possible.
Sure.
Well, and I mean, just to talk to that, I did a quick little count up. If you count EES, the Career Center, the high school, the middle school, everything, we're talking 10 schools. So basically, we're talking 10 leadership councils for 8 people, as it is right now. So I don't know if in the first year, and we haven't gotten to board configuration yet, but I don't know if in the first year it would be possible to have necessarily 2 board members at every single leadership council meeting all year, just because of that. Emily had her hand up before, Jody. Emily?
Has Putney gotten to talk about this yet?
We're going to tomorrow.
Could we, I think a lot is on the table, and I'd love to at least even just send what we've talked about back to Guilford people, and maybe everybody could write some version of what they think matches what their board would like now, and then we compare again.
Jody?
Well, I would just suggest, I guess basing on what Sean had said, and David, that we start this leadership council right away, and as Lila said, things can change, we can reconfigure it. If it doesn't work with anybody, we can come up with some other idea as a board. Not we, but the board can come up with some other ideas. But I do think it's important to start it, because I have my doubts about how it's going to hold up.
Christina?
Lyle has suggested that we include the language after responsibility of school-based leadership councils may include, and that leaves it more open-ended. And then add a sentence, through the first year, these will be established at each school.
Emily?
Should we add amendments to this clause are up to the discretion of the district board?
Well, that's.
Do we need that?
I don't think we need that, because that's a given, because they can make changes to the articles when they want to.
Okay.
As long as it goes to the vote of the public, so the unified board could put together an amendment to this and then put a special meeting together to let the public vote, and then that could change it anyway.
That's what I was asking, I guess. Would a change to whatever we write about leadership councils require a vote of the townspeople?
Well, it's going to, because when it goes to June 25th.
I get that it will the first time.
Yep.
But then for subsequent changes, it will also.
I would guess that if there were significant changes, then it would need to. If you decide, your school leadership council decided, we're not going to do this and this, but we want to add that, I feel like that is more open-ended. I think the important part is that the councils are for each school, and there's an administrator, teachers, board members. That portion seems pretty significant to me.
Yep.
But when you start to meet, what you're actually discussing could look very different in each school, depending on the priorities of your school.
Well, and yeah, and I think you're right too. When you think about like the 10 schools that are listed, the priorities that EES's leadership council is going to be very different than the priorities the high school's leadership council is going to need to address, just because of the age of the students that are in that building or in those areas. All right, so I'm hearing for leadership councils, for people to share what we've had conversations about with their individual boards, kind of work on some language, and we'll come back next week with more language related to that. Is that fitting pretty good with everybody? We've had, I think, a really robust conversation about it, but yes.
In the things that I'm going to send out, why not include the may include and over the first year, so that goes out to people with that language already in there.
That'd be great, thank you. Excellent. All right, so the last one of the four that, Sean?
And just one little item that I was thinking of, it says that the Leadership Council will be appointed, this is in the 2017 Articles of Agreement, will be appointed by a unified school board. So I was wondering how the people are actually going to get on the Leadership Council. So it's not going to be a vote by the public at large.
Can't be.
So if they're actually appointed by the board.
Well, I know that the articles, the 2017 Articles of Agreement, one of the things that we put in there is that at town meeting, community members would be appointed to the leadership councils
That's
within the
gone
school.
by, so.
But after the, it says like after the first year, so it would be like next March at town
They'll be
meeting.
nominated by the
Right.
school staff, but they'll be appointed by.
Well, they'd be a voted on, or what is it?
Appointed by the unified board. But I'm reading once again from the Articles of Agreement,
From
which
17.
is no longer, so it's kind of like, what do you take that's good out of what's been done already, and how do you change others in a short time period?
Question? Yeah, because it says that at the first town meeting following the merger, leadership councils will be determined through nominations from town meeting per the Articles of Agreement, and then they'd be appointed by the unified board.
So considering when it started, it might be even difficult to establish a leadership council, unless you choose a different methodology.
Right.
So you're not going to do it at town meeting.
You know, I'm thinking of town meeting, and I'm thinking of how we elect people today, and I can think of several people who would make good members of this leadership council, who I'm not sure would put themselves out in front of town meeting to be chosen, and I don't know how that would work. I don't know, there must be some other ways we could do it, and so maybe we could brainstorm about that. You know, maybe it could come from the school, maybe, you know, the principal, maybe it could come from Lyle, who knows so many people everywhere around the place.
A board member voted, the principal, the teachers obviously would choose their own,
Yeah.
but there would be enough people representing enough of the different constituencies that it seems like we could reach out to, even in a newspaper and a newsletter. Are you interested in, well, we have the views of Dummerston, I don't think other towns have that. But
They have, Guilford has a
Gazette.
newspaper, or they used to
Yeah.
have a newspaper.
But reaching out in lots of different ways to find out who is interested.
I know when Lyle did our focus groups for our new principal, she was very good at picking a different parents. Variety, thank you, for that. And I think there are ways of doing it that we could get good people and not worry about somebody having to be appointed or elected at town meeting.
David? That's usually say, okay. So let's think about language for next week, and we can see what we can come up with some really good verbiage. That'd be great. All right, so the last one of the four that we wanted to address was relation to the configuration of the board and makeup of the board, terms, towns, all of that stuff. And since Demerson passed around a sheet that we've been working off of all evening, I don't see that one as.
We didn't tackle that one.
It was the one that.
We only get a B on that assignment.
That's okay.
but I'd like
You
to
did a
point
very
out we
nice
did
job.
pretty well.
Otherwise, I'm not going to downgrade your grade. Anyway, does anybody, Sean?
Yeah, I was thinking about the configuration a little bit, and I was just wondering, since we're going to have the election on the 21st of May, not very far away at all, you can do absentee ballots next Wednesday. And so that board will take its seat on the 22nd of May. And so that's going to be a 2-person for every town board, made up of 8 individuals. It's gonna start, so I'm almost thinking if there is an idea to change the configuration, once again, I hate to be the person that's saying it's gonna have to wait, but I think it's probably true.
Dana?
Well, actually, it's not true. If we were to change this and give, and I'm going to suggest that we talked about giving Brattleboro greater representation so it's more representative of the population. If we were to vote to do that and it was approved, and the amendment was approved, the way that that would create some number of vacancies, and the way vacancies are filled is by the boards identifying people and or accepting applications and choosing people. So it could be at their first meeting, it could be the seats could be filled.
They can be appointed, yeah. Sean?
Well, then what would happen to the elected individuals? What would happen to the individuals that were elected on the...
The elected people would be, if
21st?
we said, for instance, what was discussed at our meeting last
Wednesday.
What day was it?
What? Was it Wednesday? Yes, it was Wednesday. It feels like a month ago.
Yeah, it is. Was similar to what the August 17th or the 2017 article said, with 5 people from Brattleboro, but instead of 1 from each of the surrounding towns, 2 from each of the surrounding towns, so that there's just better representation. And so if the 2 people that get elected on the 25th or whatever the day of the election is, they would take their seats, and that sitting board would then choose 3 more people, or would welcome nominations from Brattleboro or applications from Brattleboro. They would receive the applications and then choose 3 more people to sit on the board.
So what I heard, just doing the math quickly in my head, is that Brattleboro Town talked about suggesting going to an 11-member board.
Yes,
Yeah,
because...
which would be an odd number too.
Yes, because we
Which is
thought
an
an
odd number,
odd number is a good thing.
Yeah.
And that Brattleboro would still be combined, if you combine all the other towns, they still have more members than Brattleboro. So it would be, 6 combined of the outlying schools, and then 5 for Brattleboro.
Okay. Sean, did I see your hand before?
No.
Okay, sorry. Jody?
At our last meeting, we talked about different legalities of different things, and we came up with just the 2 that were there, and you were going to check something out, I think.
You never directed me to.
We never directed you to? I thought we did, as to what the other legalities we could do. Okay. So we don't know, because the default articles is 2, 2, and 2, so we don't know whether we could do anything differently than the original one or this one, and I kind of like to know if we can. Because I agree that maybe Brattleboro needs more votes. I'm not sure I would agree with 5, but, yeah.
Emily?
At our meeting, we talked about this also. We like having 2 from each town, and we wondered about, because Brattleboro is so much bigger, we wondered about adding 1 or 2 at-large seats, so that there's an opportunity for anybody from any town who's interested and able to serve to join the board.
Okay.
And likely that would be from Brattleboro, but maybe not necessarily.
I mean, my only concern with that is we'd done the at-large when it was 1 from all the other outlying towns, and now there are 2 from each town. And I just, one of the concerns that we've had with our, citizens, they're concerned about the Brattleboro town representation on this board. And they really feel that there needs to be more.
Sean?
I was just wondering, does anybody know what the checklist number from Brattleboro is right now?
Sorry, Sean?
What is the checklist number from Brattleboro? How many individuals?
The voting check?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. It's a little over 12,000 people.
Right, in
And,
2017, if the figures that I have are correct in the vote on November 7th, Brattleboro's checklist at that time was 7,740 individuals, and the 3 towns, I'm just adding them up quickly, was in the neighborhood of 4,800. So Putney, Jefferson, and Guilford had 4,800, and Brattleboro had 7,740. So if you think about it that way, it's not It's not that Brattleboro, I know Brattleboro has a bigger population, but I'm just wondering, we should clarify the checklist numbers. What
I'm
they
sorry.
are current, because this is old,
Right.
2017.
I saw a hand up there, yeah.
I really like the idea of an even number of people sitting on the board. I know it's inconvenient to not have an odd number, but if you have an even number, then people really have to talk with each other. They really have to work on compromises for things that are sticky. It will definitely take more time, but I think it's a really good idea. Like, I know from little kids, if you get 5, you got a problem. You get 4 talking about it, they come up with solutions. Nobody gets all their own way. So I would just like for you guys to keep that in mind, as well as other dynamics that have occurred.
Thank you.
Could you state your name, please?
Oh, Liz Adams.
Other thoughts about, did anybody else, any other boards talk about this? Christine?
So just one of the issues with the at-large versus the representational voting is because the Brattleboro checklist is larger, and I want to be careful I say this statistically correctly so people understand what I'm talking about. It ends up being that the Brattleboro has the large majority, so as the statistical majority, Brattleboro will be choosing, in effect, the representatives from all the small towns, which is quite an advantage in an at-large situation. And in fact, when this has been studied in terms of gerrymandering and things like, and politically, they recommend against at-large voting because of that, because the majority will determine who is voted. I remember Ian sat next to me and he goes, at-large voting's terrible because then Brattleboro decides everything. And I think there is some advantages in that it helps us understand we represent all the students. I think there are pluses, and it's a school board. We all come to the table to serve students and to make sure our taxpayers are served well. So it's a little different than some other situations. But I think that is the side of at-large voting that we need to consider is if there's a contentious issue, people can be voted out by Brattleboro to put somebody in. So Brattleboro's interests are to some extent. I'm not speaking against the concept entirely, but there is a certain protection for the large majority of voters because they are voting on the whole slate.
Okay.
Have I explained that well enough without treading into waters where I have claimed to be
Emily?
some sort of protected class? Not me.
I think you did a good job,
Thank
don't
you.
worry. And now I have a clarifying question again, and maybe this is so obvious, but just to be so sure, if we add at-large members, is that mutually exclusive with the everybody votes for everybody?
So, if I can try to answer your question, and people can jump in when we looked at this at the study committee level, because we had at-large members on the study committee level, what it would be was, for instance, at the study committee in their Articles of Agreement from 2017, for instance, Guilford had 1 board member, but there was 2 at-large people, so you as a Guilford voter, when you went into the ballot, you would have vote for 1 from Guilford and vote for no more than 2 from this list of at-large people. And there might only be 2 names on it, but you know what I mean? And so you'd be voting for 3 people of a 9-member board. Does that answer your question?
That does. So what we're currently talking about, is it 2 from every town?
Well,
I guess we don't have, I don't know what like our current.
Well, maybe I can clarify where I think we're at.
Okay.
Because I think that we have the Articles of Agreement that we were given by the AOE, which says 2 from each town, and it's all at large, so everybody votes for everybody.
Yep.
That'll give us 8. And then we have the additional, I'm taking it sort of as a recommendation from the Brattleboro Town Board to increase the size of the board to 11, 3 more from Brattleboro. So after those 8 members that get elected on May 21st take their seats, then a call would go out for applications or letters of interest to sit on the board, to be appointed to the board. And my understanding of the statute related to elections is that it's until the next election. So they would be appointed from essentially when they get appointed to to March, to town meeting day, to then then have to run for the remaining years of that seat. So that's what, so we have, did I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The staggered seats though set up.
There's, the stagger seat set up, and we could.
That would have to be, would there be more than 8 people, so that would have to be worked through too.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that would have to be worked out, but it's just math. Really.
Right, yeah.
But the other thing that we could, you know, if we decided to do this, the other question that we could get a legal opinion on is whether if we had 5 and 2 and 2 and 2, could they be simply town votes rather than commingled? Because in order to have a non-representative board like this, you have to commingle all the votes.
Right.
And that raises as many problems and confusions as it solves. Actually, I'm not sure there's anything that solves, but except the legal one. But that's the other thing that we could get an opinion on. I'm not sure that we can, because the numbers don't, as Sean pointed out, it should be 7 Brattleboro and 1 1/3 from each of your towns, or 2 from each. But if this is something we wanted to do, and I really like the idea of having at least 2 people from each of the towns.
Agreed.
It's a much better chance of representing the community. But if it turns out this is what we want to do, we can find out that maybe the next election could actually be by town instead of commingled.
Emma?
We did talk about one advantage of the at-large for, like, everybody votes for everybody, and that it helps to promote the idea that this is a one unified district, and that I can vote for someone that I agree with from Brattleboro to represent me and my family and my community, and it might help to further unify.
Sean? I saw your thing.
No, it's all right.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I kind of recollect that you can't, that the votes have to be commingled for the at-large.
Right.
I'm saying not at large.
So for all the seats? Oh, you wanted to
Go
just
back to the
directly?
original.
Oh,
If it was
go back to
5,
the
so
original.
I-
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed
But
that.
that
point.
would
Okay.
not be representative, and
Well-
that's the first one was that way.
Yeah.
That's what we need to find out.
Yeah, I think what David's saying
I
is
see.
that
Okay.
if we went with the Brattleboro Town proposal, that at the elections in March for the one-year seats that are already commingled, and these people that were appointed, that they would be elected, and it would, and commingling would stop at that point. And then going forward, you know, if I got that right. Jody?
I mean, I think it's interesting, and I don't know how to solve it. For 3 years, we were feeling that we were underserved, and Brattleboro was going to be the big elephant. And now Brattleboro's feeling that they're not getting that, and we're happy. So somewhere along the line, there's got to be some coming together and some compromise, I think, and to do it. And, you know, it may not be the 222, it may not be the 2225. I think maybe we should ask Lyle if she can get a legal opinion, because she said she wasn't asked the last time, and I thought she was. And she doesn't do anything she's not asked to do.
I didn't know what the question, I didn't think she was either, but.
Yeah, I thought she was going to look into it.
I move the transitional board authorizes Lyle Holiday to contact, to get a legal opinion on 2225
Board configuration?
board configuration.
Second.
And how it would be voted and the whole connection.
Including commingling votes versus representative votes.
It's moved and seconded. Conversation, Sean?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment about that. One thing I am worried about, and maybe I expressed it before, that we're about ready to have a vote on May 21st, which is going to elect by all the people in all the towns, the members of the directors for the board. And if we here tonight change that, then it's cutting all the voters out of the process.
But this wouldn't change that.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Wait till I recognize. So, I really think that it's important to go ahead with a warned vote as being the outcome at this point. We can change it after, but I think it's very important to respect the opportunity that the voters have on May 21st.
Let me ask a procedural question.
Sure, Jody.
Somebody said that the vote was the 21st and they take office the 22nd. I thought it was after the annual meeting. It is right away?
It's right away.
There's going to be a
All right,
meeting,
thank you.
as what Lyle mentioned at our board meeting on Monday. At the Unified Union Board, once again, I apologize, will take their seat on the 22nd.
Okay. I wasn't clear on that, so thanks.
Yeah. David?
And I would like to ask if you contact Larry Slayson about that, a non-partisan attorney.
Christine?
Friendly amendment, if Slayson is unable to serve, that we contact Mark Ottinger, so that we don't have to wait.
I'll second that.
Emily?
There's no such thing as a friendly amendment.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
it's just a direction.
It's February.
Emily?
I don't know any of those people, so I'm trusting you all to identify people who are unbiased if possible. But if it's still in discussion, your recommendation was really specific about a 2225, and can we make it more broad so that Lyle can also ask about a 2223 or a 2222 at large?
Perhaps the motion could be that Lyle works with some board chairs who are serving on this committee to come up with a mutually agreeable timeframe to speak with an attorney for 15 minutes about various configurations so that we can all be informed.
That work as an amendment you
available?
seconded for motions.
That's fine.
Any-
Sorry.
The board chair now.
Yeah, I'm available anytime. I think well, I'm not gonna, Kim said it better than I am gonna say it, so you can fix it after I screw this up. But there are a lot of people, and I've heard it from a lot of people, I know Kim has as well, there are a lot of people in Brattleboro who just, they hear about we only have 2 representatives, and they shake their heads, and they start talking, well, we're never gonna support that. And I think that, well, I feel like it's really important that it be at least 4 or 5. I thought 4 would be plenty, but I think 5 is more likely to be legal. But again, we need to find that out. But I think we need to recognize that there is a huge population difference and that we are representative. And if each of you is representing 900 people and each of us is representing 3,500, it's just, we're not the U.S. Senate. We need to have a more democratic model of that. And so I would just like to know that I know we're the big bad Brattleboro.
Yeah, you're terrible.
Yeah, but I don't feel that way. I don't know anybody on the board that does, particularly people that wind up getting on school boards. But just to recognize that reality, it's very rare. I can't think of another area, maybe around Hartford, where there's a town that's so much bigger than the surrounding towns that they're being asked to merge with. And it just, I think we need to recognize that reality.
Well, according to the state board,
Okay.
this area.
Kim?
First of all, I apologize. Second of all, Brattleboro, yes, we have the largest population, we have the largest number of students, but we also have a very high, we have a lot of students that are in need. We have a lot of students that are dealing with a lot of trauma. And we have to make sure that we're representing those kids as well. We need to make sure that we have, that we're taking care of them. And trust me, everybody is going to think and care about all of these kids. But the Brattleboro voters and the Brattleboro taxpayers want to make sure that we're fully represented.
Jody?
First of all, I wanted to say we got the same things from our voters when we only had 1 vote. and they weren't happy with that. But, and I was going to say what Kim just said. This board is supposed to represent all the kids. So I would hope that, I know in the past, we've said from Dummerston that we don't want Title I because we don't need it. It needs to go where it's needed. And I think that's the way these board members have to feel about everybody. If we're going to go down this route, which is not my favorite thing to do, we have to look at that. And all the towns have some sort of this poverty and drug and everything, and I realize that Brattleboro, and partly because you're bigger, has so much of it, and it's very sad. And I can't, I've just listened to a radio program today from somebody in New Jersey, a principal whose kids, didn't come to school and they were bullied and whatever because they didn't have clothes that were clean. So he put washing machines and dryers in the school.
That story. I love that story.
I was in tears
Yes.
listening to that.
I love that story.
And so I don't think anybody who is running for this board is going to take away from your Brattleboro students. So, yeah.
Good.
And I'm not thinking that they are. Again, I have to go back, we're not ones that we're sitting here right now. 5 years down the road, we don't know.
And that's what.
That's why, yeah.
That's what we used to say.
Yeah, I totally get it. And that's,
So we have to agree to work
Right.
together and be
Mhm.
friends, and I think all the things we talked about tonight, about how we can work together and be collegial and everything else, and communicate, is probably the biggest thing that we can do.
Jamie.
So everything I've just heard is really what I believe. I believe in us looking at each other as allies and representing all the children. I fundamentally believe in representational democracy and that a specific group of people that we have, one person, one vote, I really believe in that as somebody who supports democratic process. The piece that I can't figure out what to do with is the fact that I had a conversation with a friend not too long ago. And it was at my birthday party, and my friend said to me, who lived in Brattleboro, I'm going to paraphrase it a lot because it was really hurtful. This is my friend. That I am just trying to protect my school, and that I shouldn't be so concerned with busing my kids. And I sat watching my friend's face and how little empathy there was in that moment. And I got really shocked. And I actually left my birthday party and needed to take 10 minutes by myself instead of entertaining my guests to compose myself, because in a place that I expected empathy and compassion, there was a harshness and a complete, what I saw in her eyes in that moment was somebody who was, I'm in Brattleboro, and you're a whiner. And I couldn't, so in my head I was like, I don't understand this dynamic. Like, it just shocked me. So the reason I name this is because I fundamentally, and I want to protect, I really, my mom's a social worker, I get trauma. Like, I understand what we're talking about, and we have to invest in our kids. But the fear piece, and this goes back to the budget piece that we're gonna get into in a little bit. It's like, if towns, representatives from towns don't behave as their best selves, and people start creating allyships with folks about who knows what resources where, the part that makes me super sad to think about is that the part that's happening for us in Putney was the fear that we would have for school closures because other towns would unify for that. We are creating safeguards for that, and I really am grateful for that. I had heard a fear about that the towns wouldn't understand what the student population need was in Brattleboro and would take away resources that Brattleboro very strongly values. And I hear that. So the part that I'm stuck with is this sense of what to do, because we haven't even gotten into the budget discussion yet, and I feel like this plays out in that way, and that was why I asked my budget question earlier to see how it plays into the articles, because I think it's gonna play out in a significant way, and we aren't, I think this body would never do that to each other, but we can't know what future bodies, how they're going to behave. And one of the reasons I ran was because I didn't feel represented in the past by people who served in this capacity. And so I feel like I needed to figure out how to articulate that right now, even though I would never dispute the things that you all said. So I don't know what to do about that.
Kelly?
I think it's obvious that each town has different needs based on where they're located and the different populations that are in those towns. And I think it can be, I think people can understand that maybe one town needs something, whereas another town doesn't. And I don't think because I think we would be relying on those other towns. They need A, we don't need A. We're gonna need Z, and they may not need Z, and we're gonna rely on them to be making sure that we get our needs met as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, I feel like that's something, an important thought to keep in mind.
Yeah, so we still have a motion on the floor, which is to direct Lyle to reach out to, and a couple of attorneys' names were put out there.
What was the second name?
Mark, O-T-T-E-N-G.
Mark?
Artinger, yeah. So a couple of attorneys' names were put out, so Lyle will do that to get us information in relation, so the motion is basically to get us the information of how we can do this. So that motion's on the floor, it's been seconded. Sean?
Chris Leopold's name wasn't mentioned. There seemed to be some feeling that there was a reason for that. And I don't have any idea who the other people are. I know that Chris Leopold did help with the study committee. So I would say if Lyle is comfortable in choosing anybody, it should be somewhat up to her discretion also.
Yes.
Chris Leopold has told me a few times he is not an expert in election law, and when I've called, he has suggested, for instance, today I was on the phone with Will Senning from the Secretary of State's office. He has suggested that I contact an attorney or the Secretary of State who is an expert in election law. So I don't know either of these two attorneys. I don't know if either of them is an expert in elections. But I would think that we would want someone who is very well versed in election law.
So could I make a friendly amendment that would be up to Lyle's discretion on who she contacts?
Jody?
One of the reasons I would not like Chris Leopold and some other of the lawyers is they're too connected with the Board of Education and the Agency of Education. To get somebody who's maybe a little bit out of that stage, I think Mark Ottinger, used to be connected a long time ago.
He was legal counsel for the Agency of Education.
And very
10
knowledgeable in
years.
education, but not connected now. And Larry Slayson is just somebody who's worked with districts and within this town. I think he's worked with Vernon, and he's from Bellas Falls. So he's just somebody that people know around here. There are other lawyers that you could go to who I can't think of one right now that would be available other than maybe these two.
Okay, well, we have a friendly amendment on Christina's motion, so Christina?
So I would just like to speak to the choice of somebody is that there, and I mean no respect to Attorney Leopold whatsoever, but there's some feeling that maybe there were questions along the way and that a fresh start for a fresh board might be beneficial. And somebody who was led, I mean, you know, my Second Amendment Ottinger, he was legal counsel for the Agency of Education, so I think he probably knows the laws around education.
David?
I think Lyle mentioned contacting the agency or the Secretary of State, and that would be, I would actually, you know, to go along with what you're suggesting, is that be the first thing, because we may be able to do it ahead of the hearing. And certainly they know, and they generally get back to you fairly quickly.
So, Christina, are you okay with Sean's friendly amendment to let?
Well, it hasn't been seconded.
Yeah, it's not been seconded, so we can't.
All right, so never mind.
Okay.
Did Emily, did you second? No. You seconded, okay.
Wait, the friendly amendment was to allow her to contact any attorney?
No, an individual, because Lyle had mentioned the states. You know,
So would you be interested in amending your friendly amendment to direct her to contact the Secretary of State?
yeah, no, that would be my,
So-
it sounded like that's what she
And
had.
whoever seconded, you're seconding that
Yeah.
friendly amendment to have Lyle contact the Secretary of State's office to get clarification onto the election law piece of this, and you're okay with that?
Yep.
All right, so let's, I guess we need to vote first
All right, so
on the friendly amendment
All right, so the Secretary,
of State's office. So we're voting first on the amendment. All in favor of the friendly amendment to have Lyle contact the Secretary of State's office to clarify the legality around election law and the size and shape of our board?
Point of order.
Yeah.
Does that mean that if we vote for this one, then being able to contact the others is out, or?
That's the next vote.
That's the next vote.
We can
First we-
contact all of them.
Yeah, first we have to do the friendly amendment about the Secretary of
Okay,
State's office.
that's doing all of them, that lost me, okay.
Yeah, we're doing the Secretary of State's office.
same question.
All right, so all in favor of directing Lyle to contact the Secretary of State's office, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? None, okay. Now, the motion was to contact legal counsel related to the size, makeup, shape, and the election of our board moving forward. Number of names were tossed out there, and we talked about Secretary of State, but also Slason, Ottinger. So there was other, and then Lyle also had a potential other name that was recommended. So, but to have her contact attorneys to make sure that we're doing what we can within the bounds of the law, essentially. All in favor? Aye?
No, wait, I'm not sure that's what, I only heard Leopold, Slason, and Ottinger, and I know Slason and Ottinger to be nonpartisan and objective in most of these decisions. And I haven't heard a third name other than Leopold, which we said we explicitly didn't want, so I'm not sure what it got a little fuzzy after those two names.
The whole thing got a little fuzzy because we had the amendment, the friendly
Well, the
amendment.
amendment was just to add this to the Secretary, to start the Secretary of State.
Right.
But the motion was those two attorneys specifically.
Well,
Is that correct, Christina, or did?
That was my motion, and then the friendly amendment was to contact an attorney, but then you amended your friendly amendment to make it just the Secretary of State. So now we're back up to the original motion.
So do you want to tell us what your original motion was?
Oh,
Can you?
gosh, that
Can you? Or
I move that we authorize Lyle Holiday to contact an attorney. Oh, see,
I have that to get a legal opinion on the legality of going to a 2225 board or other various configurations. David asked that Larry Schlesinger be contacted for Slicen. Well, I'll get the spelling from you after. Contacted for an opinion, and if he's not available, to contact Mark Ottinger.
So the original motion did not have any names attached to it at all. And then you threw in names, which was not thrown in as an amendment, it was just thrown in. So it was because Christina made the motion that didn't have.
I will
names
amend
attached.
my motion to include the names of Slason and Ottinger.
Okay. I will second, seeing I originally seconded.
All right. Are we ready to vote?
I'm just gonna put the lawyers, the attorneys. to be contacted should be.
Okay, and then their name. Emily?
If we vote in the affirmative, then Lyle has to reach out to the state and to these attorneys? Might
Yes.
the conversation with the state solve the problem and we wouldn't require the attorneys?
It could, but what the way the motion reads now, right now, specifically saying names, she has to contact the state's attorney's office and these two attorneys.
I will amend my motion again to say if required.
Okay, if required.
Okay.
All right?
So, Jeff,
All right.
that's a legal opinion.
Are we,
Hold on.
Spend the money even if you don't have to.
If required.
if required? Because the state's attorney could tell us definitively yay, nay,
But they might say.
something else completely.
They'll say we don't
They could
understand.
give us something completely different.
They'll say we don't understand education law is what they'll say.
All right, but it's election law.
This is election law.
It's election law, it's not education law, so it's different. All right, okay, so we're ready to vote.
Mhm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? You're abstaining, okay. Sean's abstaining. All right. So those were the 4 things that we had talked about related to the amendments. Are folks ready for us to have conversations related to budget?
Aren't you glad you came to the meeting? We're gonna watch you on TV.
Sure.
We used to watch you on TV.
That's what they all say. All right.
Likely story, Kate.
Yes.
I've been texting my babysitter to see how late she can stay, so I'm a little concerned that I won't be able to stay much longer. So I just want to check in and see, will there be votes taking place on the budget or the sharing of value statements?
Well, I think the first thing we were going to do was everyone was going to come up with a one-sheeter around how they came to their budget process to give the numbers that are there for Frank, if we vote in favor to do that, to configure those things. We do have a couple of things under new business that we need to deal with. And I'm not, the B under new business is related to banking stuff. Does the budget stuff need to happen before that happens, Frank, or is that completely separate?
Completely separate.
Okay. So just because I don't think we're going to necessarily get to a vote on the budget tonight, seeing how it's 8:25, maybe we could skip the budget conversation for another few minutes, deal with the new business things that one of which needs an action required. Both of them have action required needed. So we can do that, so if somebody needs to leave, they can leave, and we're not holding up an action needed. Does that make sense? Is everybody good with that as a plan moving forward? Okay. So we're gonna skip down to new business, and why don't we just take them in order? The first thing under new business, Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System. And I'm gonna turn this over to Lyle or Frank, off to Frank, to explain to us what this is and what we need to do.
Okay, I have a very brief description of the recommendation from the Vermont Municipal Retirement System regarding enabling our employees that are currently enrolled in the Vermont Municipal Retirement System to be able to continue to access the benefit with the new employer, which is Wyndham Southeast School District. So maybe just a little bit of background. I think probably most of you are familiar with the municipal retirement benefit as part of the budget development process. All of the boards voted to offer this, and when I say all the boards, I'm saying Brattleboro, the high school, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney, to offer that benefit in, I think it was around 2007. It is also part of the collective bargaining agreement for this group of employees. And as you know, there's also a reference in the merger language that says that the new district will honor the collective bargaining agreements that are currently in place. So this is, as you know, there are many benefits offered. This is the only one that I'm aware of that requires a board action. Everything else is covered under the provision that says that the new district will honor the collective bargaining agreement. But because this is specifically administered through a state agency, They're asking for minutes of the meeting that reflect the board has essentially committed to offering the Vermont Municipal Retirement System in its current form. So there's a proposed motion that was provided to us by the retirement office. It would have been very similar to what if any of you were on the boards in 2007 when this was offered. It would be a very similar. The plan has not really changed significantly. This is the as it says in the very first line there, our defined benefit plan, and it's specifically Group A. And that is what's been agreed to as part of the negotiations process.
This is agreed to as far as the teachers' negotiations?
No, the teachers does not require a vote because the teachers' system is a mandatory if you're a licensed teacher in the state of Vermont. This benefit is mandatory if the board offers it, and that has been the case for all current municipal employees. So these are folks that are working at least 30 hours a week in all of our buildings who are not certified teachers.
Thank you.
I have a little point of order question because it says on the agenda, it says Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System, but it doesn't say action needed or discussion or anything. I just want to make sure that having this vote, it's clear that we were voting tonight so that we don't have issues with.
If it's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the
Does it say
agenda,
action
we
needed?
can vote
Okay.
on it, even though it doesn't
Okay.
say action needed.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Barb tends to put the action needed on things just to give us a heads up that
So
we can't leave the room until we do that. And it may have just been left off this particular one. So,
yeah, and that maybe the last thing is that the state is asking for our several hundred employees who will be enrolled, but they won't allow us to begin the process to enroll them until they see these board minutes that say that the benefit is going to be offered. So that's why it's time.
Jody.
And so you're asking to do it now under all these boards so that it will be honored later on with the new board?
July 1st with the Wyndham Southeast School District, yeah. It's got and I did get the new tax ID number.
Oh, good, thank you.
All right, does somebody want to make the motion?
I'll move that we, tell me what to say, Lyle.
Right there.
It's right there.
It's all.
It says the
it's
motion-
all-
this
That
motion
the
should
Wyndham
state.
Southeast School District will continue the practice of the former school districts to participate in VMERS DB Group A effective 7/1/2019. All respective school districts, Brattleboro Union High School District 6, Town of Brattleboro School District, Dummerston School District, Town of Guilford School District, and Putney Town School District will continue to participate under new school district plan. Then,
Moved and seconded.
do I have to go through with the,
Nope.
no, okay.
Moved and seconded?
Yep.
Any other discussion? Yes, Jamie.
I just wanted clarification that this isn't a change in any way, it is a continuation of a past agreement. I understood that accurately.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments related to this motion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? No. Okay. All right, the next thing under new business was banking resolution, and I'm going to turn this over to Frank because I don't know if this is about.
Oops. It's like money, I'm not gonna let you have.
Okay, so this is somewhat routine in that we have to create a depository account, and we have to link a great deal of the transactions that we set up, and we've been told that we need to move forward as quickly as we can to allow time to make these connections. So this is to set up the accounts that allows us to essentially pay our bills, pay our employees, make tax deposits. Many of the benefits require for us to set up the benefits, banking information, so we can't proceed with, for example, setting up our flexible spending accounts, the health reimbursement accounts, all of those sorts of things until we establish an actual account number. So this is a pretty standard resolution that essentially authorizes the treasurer to establish the banking relationship, and it also includes what we currently have, which is an online banking service. So again, allows us to set up the ACH payments for direct deposits for employees. That's probably one of the highest volume kinds of services that we need to get moving forward on right away. So this is with People's United Bank, and glad to try to answer any questions you might have.
Jody?
Do you deal primarily with People's United Bank?
Most of the districts are with People's at this time. I think Dummerston might be with Community, but most of the districts are currently with People's, and we really do need to consolidate banking with one institution for the district.
And what do you do about interviewing banks and finding out which ones have the better benefits? Do you do that periodically, or do you?
We do, yeah. And so much of it today is how well they prevent fraud. It's incredible how much, how many attempts are being directed toward particularly municipal entities. So I look for the level of security, the multi source entry for the various ways that you conduct banking transactions. I look at the stability of the bank. People's was a very stable organization through that 2007, 8, 9, 10 recession. Many banks weren't. And then the local relationship is very important in terms of knowing who you're doing business with, that you avoid ever being misled by someone who intentionally tries to represent the banking institution. So those are things that we monitor too, regularly. If we find unfortunately in the banking industry, it's not unusual for a bank to be acquired, so we monitor what does that mean for us.
And interest rates and things like that, do they interest you?
Interest rates are important, but most of our money is in short-term interest, and it's not a significant part of our budget or certainly on the income side. Used to be, as you know, in the 80s, it was.
You used to get interest.
You could get 5% overnight money, even more. But yeah, today it's well under 1%. So that's that's important, but not that's.
Thank you.
Is there a motion? Jamie?
Oh, I was going to ask a question. Should I wait?
Okay, you can ask a question. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the questions I had is, in our family, we've been really trying to support cooperative business, and so we joined the River Valley Credit Union, and I just wondered if there have been RFPs in the past that have, or how you do that, because we're creating a new legal entity. If you do an RFP and then folks submit, or you already have such a detailed analysis of all the different features that you were describing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an RFP is an important process because this is all coming together at such a late time. It's not possible to put that into a July 1 fully operational sort of requirement, but an RFP is absolutely a normal part of procuring a service. And we're very familiar with the local banking institutions in the area. So we know what's available. We have had relationships with a number of different banks, so we're very familiar with fees and pricing and service and fraud protection as well.
I guess I'm not sure if that's what you're asking is, are you going to do an RFP for
Not
this
on
account
this
going
cycle.
forward?
I would not be able to put that into a timeline for getting this operational by July 1.
But I think what you're saying, if I can paraphrase or kind of sum up, is that in the future, the unified board could ask you to do that
Sure.
next time it's time to come
Mhm.
up with this, and then that
Yeah.
could be part of that process.
Mhm.
It's just because we're in a short timeline.
Mhm.
Okay. So, is there a motion?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That the Wyndham Southeast School District continue the relationship with People's United Bank for banking needs. Is that full enough, or?
The Wyndham Southeast Supervisor Union
Yeah.
District, yeah.
And I think if I can make a friendly amendment, we need to add to that we authorize Frank Rucker as treasurer to do that, to set that up.
Yeah, you're essentially approving this resolution. That very top, on the top right is the name of the document. So you're approving the business deposit account certified resolution, as it says there, and it would be fine, I think, as Ricky just said, authorizing me as treasurer. I am the elected treasurer, as I have been for Brattleboro Union and for Wyndham Southeast, so it's probably not necessary, but I think it's good to have everything in the motion. So, motion to approve the omnibus business deposit account resolution with Frank Rucker as treasurer would be sufficient.
Is that an acceptable a motion from you, Sean? Okay. All right, so that's been moved. Is there a second?
Second. Oh. Go ahead, Christine.
Christine? Okay, moved and seconded. All right, any other discussion, questions related to that?
Did the motion contain the Wyndham Southeast?
It did, I said
Will
that.
continue? Because we're starting, so we're not continuing a relationship,
Well, I think we just changed
I just wanna make sure that
We
that's
changed
been
it to be,
withdrawn.
if I got this right, Kim.
We're approving.
I think we had changed it to be that the motion is that the omnibus business deposit account certificate resolution, move to approve that and approve Frank Rucker as treasurer to sign that agreement.
For the Wyndham Southeast
For the-
School District.
For the Wyndham Southeast School District. Yes. Okay. All right, any other questions, thoughts, concerns on that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None. Okay, great. All right, so moving back up to unfinished business, item number A, or letter A, which is budget. We, at our April 8th meeting, had discussed having everybody put together how, as a school district or a school board, you came up with your budgetary process, and what you did. So we, I think people had those conversations, had that stuff done. Emily?
I'm wondering about the time and everyone's best mental efforts, and I wonder what do people think about everybody sending the one-pager to the group to review on our own time and then discussing at our next meeting?
I'd second that motion.
Were I voting, I would as well.
If it were put in the form of a motion, I'd be
I
happy to.
I put the former into a motion.
All right, so moved and seconded.
I need to know the
Okay.
motion.
I move that we all send our one-pagers from our towns to the board, but not in the form of a conversation, and that we review on our own time and discuss at our next meeting.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none. Okay, so that's moved. So
Was it, did you second that, Christine?
I seconded it.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
I think multiple people did, but Christina beat everyone to it.
I did it before the motion was made.
I heard your voice, so I'm like, I think that was Christina, but let me double check.
All right, so related to Emily's motion, I typed up and printed copies from the high school end of things, just to give you a little flavor.
We did as well.
So I'm gonna pass those this way, so everyone can have a copy of that. And send it. Yep. So if people have theirs in paper and they want to share tonight, please do. Otherwise, let's share electronically, and then we can read these on our own
By
time.
when?
So that we can have the discussion next Thursday?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, because I wanted to get additional feedback on mine tomorrow night and then send it to you on Friday. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, because then we'll have it before next Thursday.
Okay, go.
So, seeing nothing else on our agenda,
I do have to, just
Okay.
a couple of
Yep.
quick announcements. So next Thursday is the beginning of diversity sort of weekend. I will not be here at the beginning of or in Putney, I guess is where we'll be, because there's a film being shown at the library on my request, so I feel like I
It's
need
too bad.
to.
I'd like to see that
Yeah.
too.
It's an excellent film.
It's an excellent film, so I won't be able to start, and Frank will not be here either. So you'll be on your own for a while, but I know that you guys are all good.
You know what we happen when we're on our
I
own.
do know.
we'll mother through.
I know Brattleboro Town.
I promise to not make too many motions. Just sign you to do things.
So, yeah, that's my only request. Don't assign too many tasks to me while I'm up there. Yeah, but I will show up after I get that going. So just so you know that.
Great. Anything else? Okay. All right, so is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved what?
To adjourn.
Second.
Moved to adjourn and
Second.
seconded. Okay, all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned until next week. Thank you all.